Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
What is an empathic medium? What does that kind of jarring empathy do to your relationships with other people? What does it do when you're invited aboard UFOs?
Hello, and welcome to the 959th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, coming to you from WON AM and FM radio here in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, on the Paranormal Radio app, from TalkStream Live, on YouTube, and via TuneIn.com. I'm Ben, and those shape-shifting questions came from my co-host, partner in Paranormal Adventures, and dad, Paul. And if you'd like to communicate with us today, the phone number is 401-766-1240 from anywhere, or you can email Paul at behindtheparanormal.com.
Valerie LaFaso is an empathic medium, a Reiki master teacher, a paranormal and UFO investigator, and the author of the Tangled Web of Friends young adult paranormal fiction series. She has appeared on our show many times as a guest and as a panelist, and even a special guest co-host. Valerie is also a contributor to our forthcoming book, Behind the Paranormal 3, Uneasy Skies, coming next year. Check out her Facebook page at facebook.com/Valerie LaFaso.
So Valerie LaFaso, welcome back to Behind the Paranormal.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, it's always great to have you with us, Valerie. And apparently this is the second time in 6 months, so congratulations.
Very cool.
It's not years.
We have a couple of guests coming up who haven't been on in 10 years.
Wow.
So
I mean, it's a great accomplishment. So I guess we'll just hop right into it. So what is an empathic medium, and how did you find out that you are one?
So an empathic medium is a person who is sensitive to the energies of everything in our world. Everything, I think most people will agree, everything gives off some sort of energy, and we are susceptible to feeling that energy at any given moment, and it tends to affect us in a deeper way than it does other people. I first heard the term, it was probably 15 years or so, and it was on that lovely show, The Most Haunted, out of the UK. I'm sure you guys have heard of it. Mm-hmm. And one of the mediums that they used on the show was talking about somebody who was an empath, and he started describing what that meant. And it just kind of lit up my world, because I went, oh my God, there's a reason why I feel this way all the time. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's how I learned about it.
Well, we have a couple of questions from listeners coming in already. Here's one, actually two, from Peter, our good friend in Bogota, Colombia. Ben, if you would.
Sure thing. And Peter writes to us, please ask Valerie, can you share one of your most interesting field investigations?
And I might add to that,
yeah.
see how your empathic medium abilities were a factor in that case.
Yeah, they've always been a factor. It's just my level of understanding has definitely changed over the years. When I first started investigating, I knew I was an empath, but I didn't really understand how that worked with intuition and how I could use that on investigations. So I would say probably one of the most fun investigations, to kind of answer Peter's question, and hi Peter, by the way. I went with the investigative team of Andy Kitt, Mike Stevens, and the medium on the team at the time, Isabeau Esby, to Rolling Hills Asylum out in East Bethany, New York, which I think a lot of people have heard of and been to. And I learned a lot about my intuition out there. I was picking up on the thoughts of the people around me, and I didn't know it until our medium validated that for me later on as we walked around. So that was really interesting, and we definitely encountered a few odd things in that location, including a spirit that was hanging out in the corner of a room that jumped Andy. Kind of tried to attach itself to Andy.
Somehow I know Andy too. Somehow I can't quite picture that. But who won?
Andy did, with help from the medium.
Well, So he didn't do it by himself, is what we're saying.
Yeah. Well, we all need help.
We do.
Yeah, I would interject before the next listener question. How do I put this? Do you have the same empathic connections with people who most people consider to be dead? I mean, we consider them to be living in parallel realities, but that's us. And people who are, walking around next to you.
Sometimes. I think it really depends on the person, whether living, dead, parallel, or not. And I'm definitely a lot more on board with the parallel realities concept now than I was, but I still think that based on what I feel, the energetic signature is just a little bit different depending on what I'm picking up on, such as, when what I believe is a deceased loved one, that feels different than an ET. I have had extraterrestrials show up in kind of like an energetic form. They feel different. I think I've been encountering a lot more. I don't know how to phrase it, but where it's a thin layer of something where we can kind of encounter those other places. That feels different as well. Yeah, I don't know if I'm explaining myself right.
Physics would call it a membrane.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another question?
We do, and Peter kind of pivots a bit, pivoting Peter. He pivots into, what is your creative process for developing and writing paranormal fiction?
Great question. Thank you for asking that, Peter. Lately, it's just been very intuitive. I kind of put it out there, who wants to tell a story, and see what comes to me. I've always been a fairly intuitive writer. When I get stuck, I'll go, okay, how do I next move forward? And I just kind of take a step back, take a deep breath, and see if anything flows. If nothing flows in that moment, I'll walk away, and I will meditate or go for a walk or do something that kind of quiets that human side of the brain and allows the other stuff to come through. And once I get hit with that next piece of inspiration, it tends to flow from there.
Okay. Now we have two questions from Phil. Now, Phil is a show reporter, one of our official reporters, but he has moved out of the Litchfield Triangle area. He used to report regularly from there, and we're looking forward to reports from his new domain, which I believe is North Carolina. So
that's a jump.
Well, as the whole planet's haunted, as John.
Well, I guess that's a good point.
There's something going on there.
We're going from middle of nowhere to Connecticut to I guess middle of nowhere North Carolina. Not really a difference. I guess maybe just the temperature. I'd like to think that he lives in the mountains in a secluded existence.
We're gonna get in trouble. Read the question.
I'm not trying to get you in trouble, Phil. Anyway, so Phil writes to us. Valerie, what is your take on quote-unquote dead people who speak to you? Are you comfortable with Paul and Ben's view that these entities are not dead at all, but very much alive in their other physical realities? ?
I don't have a great answer for that. I can say that I have a lot of evidence to support the idea that at least some of them have a consciousness that is associated with the life that we are currently living, because they answer questions for people, for their loved ones, that make sense to them in this current reality. I think I said a little bit earlier, I am definitely more on board with your theory now than I was probably a couple years ago, based on some personal experiences that I've been having. And I want to know more. I want to ask questions of the energy that I'm feeling to find out, where is it coming from? What is the purpose, and that kind of thing. I just haven't had the right scenario to ask the right questions to get more information on that. So I don't have a great answer, but I'm looking for more answers, if that helps.
As we all are. That's fair enough. I'm going to share a little note from Phil here.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sure he wouldn't mind. Oh, no, it's not a question. I recently moved to Savannah, Georgia. So it's not North Carolina. Okay.
Well, if I read a little further, I would have had my questions answered.
And that's not the middle of nowhere. Where there is a large paranormal presence, but everyone here seems to have the 19th century spiritualist mindset that one would see at Lilydale. I would like to change that. Well, he's on a crusade.
More power to you.
That's also the home, Savannah, of our dear friend Murray Silver, who is an absolutely unique person and someone we've had on the show and we'll have back very soon.
He always gave me the same vibe as John Hammond from Jurassic Park.
Yeah, very powerful kind of presence, yeah. So, okay, now some of our own questions. Now, Valerie, what's the difference between a regular medium and an empathic medium?
So a regular medium is going to be talking to who they believe is the dead guy. It's, they're communicating more verbally or, through hearing and seeing what they believe is the spirit, whereas an empath is feeling it. So I will feel the energy, and I have to then translate it into messages. It's very rare that something comes through audibly or visually, if that makes sense.
What other kinds of mediums, I guess the plural is media, are there? New York Times, Washington Post.
Yeah. There's all different ways to sense the energy. Some are stronger visually, some are stronger hearing things. Some are really good with like holding an object and getting information off the object. It's all about figuring out where your strengths are and how to utilize them.
What's the difference between a medium and a psychic?
A medium is going to be dealing more with conscious energy of like souls, departed ones, loved ones, whereas psychics are getting more like information similar to doing card readings, doing psychometry, getting information about future events, that type of thing. It's more information from the physical world as opposed to the spirit world.
Okay, now I want to preface this next one by saying you're a dear friend. We've known you for many years, and we expect to be working with you more on the show, etc. But so you're an exception to this. But it seems that so many mediums who are advising people, and psychics too, about their lives, have their own personal lives an absolute mess. What say you about that?
I completely agree with that. I think in reality, if you look at everybody's a mess to some extent. I think
you're a mess.
Hey, I'm well aware of that.
But you look at therapists. A lot of therapists are trying to help people, and their own lives are a mess.
Oh, that's so true.
I think mediums want so badly to help people that they forget to take care of themselves, and then they end up in a place where, their lives are kind of crumbling around them. And I know for me, it's a lot of work to balance and to really have good boundaries to know, if I have somebody that comes to me for help, I may not be in the position to help them because I might need to take care of myself. It's really hard to say no to people that need help.
Yeah.
And I think, a lot of mediums can get themselves in trouble that way.
Yeah. Ben, I'm monopolizing the questions here.
Oh, no worries. You're eager, you're ready to go, and which is fine with me.
At my age, that's pretty cool.
Because that allows me to write things down and kind of capture little snippets of information. So I guess we'll start here. So we're going to I'm going to pivot this slightly. Is there a difference? I'm not going to say is there a difference, but what is the difference between being an empath versus empathy?
Well, everybody on the planet has the ability to have empathy. Mm-hmm. An empath is a person who just very, very naturally can put themselves into another person's shoes without even thinking about it most of the time. So we're utilizing empathy, but it's not a sole characteristic of what an empath can do.
Mm-hmm. Now there's a really interesting. I've learned a lot about very interesting psychological stuff on the side, and there was an argument that was made, not necessarily saying I agree, but I'm going to present it and see how you feel about it. Because I tend to think psychology can kind of be hit or miss a lot of the time, but that's just my opinion. Anyway, that sort of hyper empathy, we'll call it. Being an empath is essentially a survival mechanism from being in a traumatic environment, right? So let's say you have a tough relationship with a parent or an authority figure or something like that. And so you become hyper aware and hypersensitive of any sort of change, any sort of tick, and you can kind of like sense a change in mood or something like that. So you end up walking around eggshells and things like that. So the argument that was presented in this particular book I was reading was that the ability of being sort of empathic comes as a survival mechanism. Is that something that would be a dimension of how you would view being an empath, or is it kind of just like missing the mark?
So in my experience, you guys have, like you said, we've known each other for a long time, and we met through the KRI Center that closed down in 2019.
Rest in peace.
Yes. 8 years ago, I started doing an empath support gathering at the KRI Center, which I still do to this day. I do it an online version, and I do it now at the library in Epping, New Hampshire. I would say, first of all, I believe that empaths are born as empaths. I don't think they are created. I will say that a lot of the empaths that have come to my group have had trauma, but it looks like there was trauma that shut them down, and then a second trauma later on that then reawakened their search and awakening to, the fact that they are an empath. However, I've noticed a trend that the younger generations don't have that. Meaning the younger generations of empaths, the younger people like in their 20s. They tend to be raised by the empaths that had trauma, and therefore they're raised in a completely different way with awareness that we didn't have, the older empaths. And I may look young, but I do consider myself an older empath at this point. So I don't think that trauma creates empath. I do think it's a part of many empaths' lives.
That's a good answer. I like that.
One of the distinctions the audience might want to know about would be the difference in words and meaning between sympathy and empathy. And I've always thought of sympathy as feeling for someone. You feel sorry for them or you're sympathetic. And empathy as feeling with someone, actually sharing the trauma or the good things or whatever. Would you want to say anything about that? Maybe add to it at all?
Yeah, I would add that, sympathy, like you said, is very much, feeling for somebody, whereas empathy I think, is looking at it without your own personal feelings involved.
Okay. I'm thinking of an ancient Star Trek episode, The Empath, from the 60s series.
Oh, yeah. I wish I could relate to that, Dad, but
Yeah, well, I know. Well, I'm sure I'm the oldest here, so you can look it up. It was very interesting. The poor woman just took on, probably in a more extreme fashion than actually occurs, the feelings and problems of others. And actually, she would heal people by taking on their diseases, things of this kind. It's something we've heard about, but I'm sure that's not as far. Do you go that far? You don't take on people,
Not anymore.
Not anymore. You used to?
I mean, well, being an empath, you have to be very careful of not taking on too many people's energies, because if you don't manage it and take responsibility for your own energy, you will end up completely drained, which leads to depression and physical illness.
Well, that's a good point.
So you have to be very, very careful of that.
It's funny, just I don't want to talk about me, but except for a minute, Ben and I had a publicist number of years ago, whom we're still friends with, love her dearly, but she was determined to turn me into a psychic. All right, she had represented John Edward. And, yeah, I mean, we all have a certain amount of that, but she said, just try it. And so I always said, all right, I'll give it a shot. And a couple of friends of hers came to me, and I would put myself, from our point of view, where I was them in the multiverse someplace. It was overwhelming. I could not deal with it. I had their fears, all their hopes. I knew it was awful. It was way too intimate. And I'd rather kind of stick with the books and in the trenches, with that kind of thing. I don't know. So maybe that was an empathic experience of some kind. But yeah, I couldn't.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't deal with it. It was way too intimate. So anyway, that takes care of my next question: how you handle these stimuli.
So I have further questions. I have questions. So there's. I want to take a few steps back. You said a sentence that really stuck out to me, which was the human side of your brain. What do you mean by that?
I mean, like, the side that is taking in the, television and, is receiving all of the human stuff that goes on in this day-to-day world. Mm-hmm. My teacher, who I mentioned earlier, Isabel, used to talk about the dog and the mailman. And, the spiritual side of your brain is the mailman trying to deliver the messages, and the human side is the dog that you have to distract so the mailman can deliver the messages. But there's so much noise from the world, trying to plan for dinner and figure out what you have to do this week, and you have this meeting coming up at work, and you have all of this stuff going on in the human world that the spiritual stuff can get lost if you don't find ways to quiet that and allow the messages to come through.
That is a really interesting point. A lot of ancient sort of monastic type cultures, whether Buddhist or early Christians or whatever, their whole thing was to go just leave everything, go into a cave somewhere, and just kind of exist there. There's this sort of poetic way you can think about it. It's like, oh, they're going away from society, they're doing all these things. But the reason that they all moved out there was because that's where the spiritual stuff was. It was on the outskirts of society, because when you're inside of sort of the concentric circles of civilization and order, it's like you're so obsessed with trying to order the rest of everything else that it's taking up everything, and so you have to set aside time in order to sort of commune with the extra. If I don't want to say extra, that's not the right word for it. The sort of man, language is trash.
Yes.
Hey, I'm an editor.
I appreciate your struggle, though.
Right? Yeah. Well, it's so hard to talk about this stuff sometimes because it can get so esoteric, and you're trying to explain all these things with words, and then everybody talks past each other. But essentially, the idea is that you step away from sort of the mundane stuff to deal with the other just as important, if not more important, aspect of life, which is the spiritual aspect of it. Because everything has a multiplicity of layers that all sort of are happening at the same time. And in order to participate in an activity completely, you have to be a participant in all the layers of that activity. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I like the way you explain that.
Yeah. Okay. So before we get to our break, I'm going to ask a complicated question.
Awesome.
25 words or less. So I think it's interesting that since you started sort of hanging around with us, I don't want to say your experience of things changed, but how things have come across has sort of changed a little bit. In some cases, it sounds like, and I might be wrong here. I've been working on this idea as time has gone on, because we have so many people who come on the show who tell us X, Y, and Z, and then we experience an event, and it's like we experience it as X, Y, and Z. Do you believe that there's obviously something happening, otherwise we all wouldn't be in this field, right?
Right.
My personal opinion is our subjective experience of that reality is sort of how the event manifests, almost. And it's like, as soon as, we've had people write into the show that they were in, they were part of a different group or whatever, and they're like, well, I started viewing it with your theories, and then the event completely changed. And now I didn't view it as, oh, I'm right. I did at the time, but now I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, oh, I think this means something different. I think perhaps it is that the human experience of the event is what we get out of it. Now, I'm posing this right before our break, so now you got a chance to think about it. You can think about your opinion of it, because right now we got to go to the break. But my question would be, do you believe that the subjective experience, or the subjectivity of the person, is sort of influencing the experience? And so we should probably take our break.
There we have it. You're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON. 1240 AM and 99.5 FM in New England's beautiful Blackstone River Valley. We'll be right back with our great guest, Valerie LaFaso, so stick with us.
Hi, this is Nancy Phillips, the button chairperson for the Autumn Fest Committee. We thank everyone for their many years of supporting Autumn Fest, and to let you know that this year's buttons are now available at local small businesses. The cost is still $1 per button, and you could win a cash prize of $500, $250, or $100. If you own a local business and would like a bucket of Autumn Fest buttons, please email me at buttons@autumnfest.org, and I look forward to seeing you at this year's Autumn Fest.
Local and live at 99.5 FM.
Well,
what are you attempting to do?
I'm trying to play. Well, there we are. I'm going to start that again because it's so cool.
Hello, this is Travis Walton, and you're listening to Behind the Paranormal.
Wow.
Can you clean that up, do you think?
Well, Dad, there's a little old adage in the audio industry, which is garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah, I've heard that. Printing too. Anyway, welcome.
There's no winning.
Welcome back to Behind the Paranormal on WOON AM and FM. That was an attempt by Travis Walton, the great UFO experiencer, recorded in Roswell, New Mexico, at the festival recently, to say you're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, which you are. Anyway, we'll thanks to Matt Moniz for getting that recorded.
He did his best. I appreciate it, Matt.
Anyway, Valerie, have you had a chance to think about Ben's question?
I have, and that's a great, challenging question, so I appreciate that. I definitely have to agree that people's preconceived notions can affect what they experience. I think it's kind of reminds me of the double slit experiment that I'm sure you guys are familiar with. Depending on whether or not you're looking, the experience is different. And I don't know how to fix that.
Or should it be fixed?
I don't know. I definitely try to go into any situation where I'm investigating with the least amount of information possible, because I want to be as objective. I don't want to hear the history of the location. I don't want to hear other people's experiences until after I have walked through and felt the energy, because I don't want to fit what I am picking up on to somebody else's experiences.
That's just what we do when we can.
Mm-hmm.
and help somebody in New Zealand or somewhere. Obviously, you have to hear the stuff, but if it's someplace we're going to go, we do exactly the same thing you do.
Right.
Yeah, and it's really challenging because people get so excited and they want to share their experience and they want to convince you why you should go to where they want you to go. But that's why we try to have, more than one person involved in taking in a case so, somebody like me can remain as objective as possible. And then when I do go to a location, I try to ask a lot of questions of my intuition to try to get as clear a picture as possible. But, like you said, it's shifted over the years as I've learned more. And I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg. Was I not experiencing those things before, or am I just now because I know about them?
Right.
Yeah. No, it's. I think it's important to realize that we participate in the experience. We don't just have it happen to us.
Right. Yeah. It's not like a movie that happens to you. I mean, even then, you're still participating in it because it's a story, right? And the story of the paranormal, which is why we tell ghost stories, is something we participate in. Yeah. So the only sort of common denominator that I can find really is that there's a pattern that happens. Right, that's sort of unbeknownst to us, and we're all sort of cogs in the wheel for it at some point, somewhere along the way, and then an event happens that we're all participating in, and we continue to participate in, and so it's the amount of data points we have is like remarkably small, and I think it's really important to keep that in mind, especially when it comes to That's why I appreciate your honesty, Valerie. It is really hard to remain objective in all of it because we want to be right, and it's especially me. But it's at the same time it's like I don't know. The more I've kind of thought about this stuff and really kind of engaged with different types of understanding of not just the paranormal but other portions of the world. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to experience being human? What does it mean to think of spiritual stuff? And how does that affect our day-to-day life? Because I think here in the modern world, not even just the West anymore, it's kind of just the modern world now, spirituality is just kind of tacked on at the end. It's an optional thing. You go to work, you come home, you do X, Y, and Z, and if you want to go to church, you want to go to meditation class, whatever you want to do, it's tacked on at the end, and who cares? And the rest of our sort of human story is treated like that. It's like, well, the political, the mundane, all that stuff was on the forefront of the ancient mind, and then everything else was just kind of tacked on at the end. And it's like, well, that's not really fair because that's not true. And I think that's probably why there's sort of this problem we have today of people just being incredibly depressed and anxious. As sort of time has gone on, we've lost so much of our story, and for convenience or for whatever reason, we've lost the human story. And I think the paranormal is really important because it interprets a part of it that has been around forever, but it's just sort of tacked on, which it shouldn't be tacked on.
No, excuse me. You are a UFO and ET experiencer as well, and
yes.
You wrote actually a very touching chapter that will be included in our book next year. Can you briefly talk about your experiences and how being an empath affected them, and whether ET interest in you was because you're an empath?
In my case, I do believe that I was visited because I am an empath. The experience happened to me when I was 4, and I was with my father, who he passed away in 1997 before I was really involved in any of this stuff, but I believe he's also an empath. So I don't want to give too much away because I want people to read, the chapter in the book when it comes out. But I can say that, my experience happened in Derry, New Hampshire. I was 4 years old. It was about 1980 or 81, I believe. And there was a very unusual craft in the middle of the road that my father and I encountered. And the really fascinating thing for me is that he and I had very different experiences. He was afraid. I was excited and curious.
Yep.
But I was 4. I hadn't learned to be afraid of UFOs. My father, was into science fiction. He read a lot of the books. He watched the TV shows. He was afraid. And I think that's very, very interesting, that, he had all of this, wisdom and experience, and I didn't. And I think I took away a lot more from the experience than he did. I believe that, and I will be talking a little bit about this at the Exeter UFO Festival at the end of the month, or beginning of next month. I believe they enhanced. I don't want to say enhanced. I believe that they put things in motion to help me find ways to utilize being an empath to help other people.
Okay, yeah, that was a spoiler. We were going to ask you what you're going to talk about at the festival. We'll mention that again later. Now, you've dealt with just about every area of the paranormal and et cetera, and many spiritual areas as well. It's generally known that many people who undergo near-death experiences have many, not all, but many have a spiritual transformation. Have you encountered people who've had near-death experiences that have made them empaths or enhanced what they already had in that direction? That's kind of a question out of left field. But.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think I've had any other empaths talk about near-death experiences. The only person I know directly that has had a couple near-death experiences is my aunt, who is my father's sister. But she wouldn't talk about them. She would admit that she had them, but she wouldn't talk about what happened. And I believe I know she's intuitive. She may be an empath. I'm not quite sure, about that, but I think anything huge that happens in your life can set things in motion, to get you on a different path, or to get you on the path that maybe you should have been on, if that makes sense.
No, it's a very astute point.
Yeah, I don't know that it would make you more empathic. It would just maybe awaken you to the fact that that's there and you need to focus a little bit more on it.
We mentioned children before in the sense of generational manifestations of this sort of thing. The term indigo children has been around for quite some time. These are children, Ben doesn't know this, but I think he's one, who've been around and are sort of have a natural aptitude for empathy or empathic, psychic or whatever you want to call it. Have you found that indigo children's parents could be just anybody or ordinary folks, or are they people who themselves might have been indigo children before the concept developed? Or because you were talking about how people who are empathic raise their children a little differently.
Yeah, I definitely think it could go either way for indigo children. I think it's going to depend on the parents and the purpose that child has in life, because I think, there's a lot of challenges that are set before us in life, and I think there are some parents out there who maybe are not spiritually minded. They may not have the natural tendencies, but they need to be tested and challenged on how to manage a child who is. But it does seem like a lot of the more open children that I've encountered do have parents that are already open to spirituality.
Now, what would you suggest for someone at any point in life who suddenly becomes aware that they have gifts like you have? I mean, what would you say? And, 9 times out of 10, you don't have any support, and you don't know what it is. So what course would you take?
I think there is a lot more support out there than there used to be. There's a lot of various groups you can find through, like Meetup.com is how we advertise a lot of our groups, and I know there are a lot of other spiritual-based meetups out there in various locations, so that's a good place to find like-minded people. Doing some internet research, there's a lot of resources out there, and not all of it's going to be good, but, trust your gut. Go with what resonates with you and walk away from things that don't resonate with you, and just explore. Just read, listen to podcasts and find people that you can talk to.
Okay. Now we have two more questions from Peter, one of which anticipated one of mine, which is how do you know what you're talking to? So Ben,
Peter.
if you would.
Sure thing. Somehow there we go.
Right at the bottom.
I gotcha. No, somehow it switched to your email, so I switched back over.
They're coming
to
for
this.
us.
Yes, we're arrested. Anyway, so Peter writes to us, when you sense ET contact, how do you know they are ET?
The energy signature is very, very intense. I don't know how else to describe it. And, Ben, you had talked a little bit about language before and how difficult it is to put this stuff into words. And that's always been my struggle. When trying to describe feelings, it's so hard to put it into words. But it's unlike anything I had ever felt before when I first encountered them. And I think some of it does come from my own personal experience when I was 4. It kind of gave me a foundation to go off of.
Okay. Sorry.
So he continues to say, are you seeing UFOs at the same time as you're experiencing this?
Not currently. Right now, the majority of the ETs that I encounter are my own spirit guides, but I've not had a UFO encounter recently.
So then his second question is there a metaphysical significance to your neck jewelry?
He's obviously watching the video feed, which a lot of people are not, but Valerie's wearing a very large...
Well, slowly but surely, Dad.
Okay. Go ahead, Valerie.
It's an amber, piece of amber. Amber, I think, is supposed to be good for the throat chakra, so it's good for communication. So doing something like this where I want to speak eloquently and clearly, it's good to wear something like this. I find it protective as well.
As long as you're not cloning dinosaurs or something.
No.
Amber was the basis
there
of
are no
Jurassic
bugs
Park.
inside.
There we go.
So let's talk about the Exeter UFO Festival coming up Labor Day weekend, the 3rd and the 4th. The actual Labor Day is not included, but the weekend is Saturday and Sunday. And we're really looking forward to that. It hasn't taken place in 2 years, and it's organized by the Kiwanis Club, the Exeter Area Kiwanis Club, to benefit local children's charities. So it is a wonderful event for a great cause, and we just love it. I mean, you go and the local merchants are all involved along Main Street. They got all the blow up ETs, in the bandstand there, and they rename menu items after Roswell or flying saucers or something like that. I just think it's really wonderful. So we're going to be a number of great speakers. We can anticipate our
sort of announcement here.
Yeah,
I'll help you with that.
Yeah, okay.
So besides you, Valerie, we have a bunch of people, including Ralph Blumenthal, Kathleen Martin, Peter Robbins, Jennifer Stein, Bob Terrio, Mike Stevens, of course, Lynn Nickerson, Mac Maloney, and many others.
Yeah, One and Captain Cobra, along with Mac. There's going to be a great variety of subjects. And could you tell us once again what you'll be speaking about, Valerie?
Yeah, my lecture is called Aliens in Our Backyard, and I'm going to be speaking on some ET UFO encounters that happened in the Derry, New Hampshire area, where I had my own experience, and how it relates to being an empath and what I think it means for society in the world.
And you're speaking on Saturday?
Saturday at 9 a.m.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, first thing.
Well, yeah, the first one. That's always
Yep.
tough because all the technical glitches have to be resolved.
Yeah,
So-
you know.
Well, I think Matt Moniz is going to be there handling that aspect of it, and he's a real professional with that, so I'm sure it'll be fine. We're speaking later in the day ourselves. I think we are 12 to no, not 12. 1 to 1:45, something like that. It's on the schedule. I'll let you know next week.
Mm-hmm.
But we're talking about time storms. It's a funny term, but it was coined by the British researcher Jenny Randalls, who started noticing all these commonalities in various cases involving cryptids or UFOs or things of that kind that involve weather and physical reactions of people when they were experiencing these things, and a number of things that indicated time slips and weird things that seem to be common to many different kinds of phenomena. And I thought that would be, it's seldom spoken about. So we're going to talk about a number of her cases and a number of ours where that has taken place. So, the website is ExeterUFOFestival.org, and it will give you the whole schedule of things of this kind. And we'll be selling our books as usual in the little author's room there. The beautiful Exeter Town Hall, a very historic, is a place where that the lecture series takes place, but also outside. Our good friend Mike Stevens is going to be driving a bus, I guess, out to the scene of the incident at Exeter, which we've done the shows on before. And there's also the Betty and Barney Hill incident, which took place near there. And Kathy Martin will be one of the speakers. And she'll be not necessarily talking about that case, but she'll be available to discuss it privately. And so all sorts of wonderful things will be going on. There are children's activities. I believe there's an alien parade involving pets that dress up.
I was going to say, is the pet costume contest still going to be a thing?
Well, I hope so, because, you know, they
so.
come into the author's room. You never know what you're going to see walking through that door. It's really, really pretty cool. So, Valerie, you have any further comments on that? Because I know you are involved heavily as we are.
Yeah, I'll be there all weekend. I'll have my Tangled Web of Friends books available for sale. I've been working on putting together a workbook for empaths to help them develop their intuition. I was hoping to have it finished and printed for the festival, but that's unfortunately not going to happen. But I'll have a preview and more information on it there, so people can take a look at it.
Well, we're really looking forward to seeing you there. Now, we have some more time, so I just wanted to get the festival all promoted there too. So Valerie, what are the next steps for you in your work as an empathic medium, and where can people find out more?
So I am working on just kind of broadening my experiences. One of my areas of expertise seems to be working with physical spaces like houses and land. So I have coming up, I'm going to be working with a realtor who has a property that is challenging to sell. So I'm going to go in and see if I can do anything to help clear the energy to help it sell. So that's one of the things I'm looking at working on right now. And I'm just always looking for opportunities to investigate and, ask some of the questions of whatever energy is in these locations. So the best way probably right now to get a hold of me is through Facebook. You can just search me on Facebook as Valerie Lofaso, author and empathic medium, and you should find my page that way.
Now, one thing, too, and we haven't forgotten about this, but COVID kind of got in the way for a couple of years, was the possible new flap area, as we call it, in southern New Hampshire. And we haven't forgotten about that. We are going to, and we'll discuss it, I think, when we're in Exeter with you. Coming up and starting an investigation there, which you've already actually started.
Yes.
So really pretty interesting kind of case. So you still got a few more minutes. How common in your experience are empathic mediums? Like 9 out of 10 people, or
I think there's way more of us out there than we realize. I think there's a lot of people awakening to this right now. I think everything that's going on in our world, all of the challenges that we faced over the last couple years, through the pandemic and politics and just everything that's been going on, I think is really challenging people to take a different look at their lives and where their priorities are. And I think that's, setting people on a path to search for why they feel the way they feel, and they're finding their way to being an empath as the answer. And so I think they're fairly common, actually.
Well, this is unfair to ask this with about two minutes left, but does your particular ability extend to animals? And are there animal empaths?
This won't surprise you. I do believe cats are very empathic.
Ooh, cats, yeah.
I know you guys are both fans of cats. But yeah, I do believe that animals are very empathic. I think they experience the energy of the world on a very pure level and can communicate with it and interact with it in ways that we don't quite understand yet.
Have you ever, this is going to sound pretty weird, but have you ever, in a sense, worked with an animal in any kind of a case?
In various ways. I've had a lot of weird experiences with animals. I had a cat, he passed away a few years ago, that when I was in that half awake, half asleep state, he would talk to me in language that I could understand, and I would wake up going, wait a minute, I was just hearing you talking. And it was very freaky. Animal spirits do come through on investigations. Not a lot, but occasionally. Usually if it's, it would be because they're very attached to a homeowner or something like that. But I have also encountered Dogman, I guess, if we want to consider that an animal.
Cryptids?
Wow.
I
think it
that
was more of an elemental.
Yeah.
He was protecting the land of the location that I was at. Very, very protective, very intense energy.
Interesting. Positive energy?
As long as you're not messing with the land, yes.
Yeah. Oh no, that's we know all about guardians.
There's a really fun sort of thing that I learned a few months ago, that in ancient times, if there were ruins of a city, they would typically be considered haunted, and whatever the gods were of that city would be the ones haunting it. That was the idea behind it. So I think of that idea sometimes, that I'm like, oh, it's a really interesting way of thinking about it, because it's like, oh, whatever was being worshipped, quote unquote, there, then ends up haunting it, ironically.
I mean, if the collective consciousness is putting that energy into that location, it wouldn't surprise me.
Let's introduce all of these concepts now. 3 minutes left in the show.
Right. Well, it's the fodder for a future discussion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Valerie, thanks for a great discussion. We'll look forward to seeing you in Exeter in a couple of weeks. And there we are.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay.
Always a pleasure.
So
we've already talked about the Exeter UFO Festival, but if you want to hear about it again, it is returning at the end of September at the Exeter, New Hampshire Town Hall. That's over Labor Day weekend, September 3rd and 4th. This is a great event, and the whole town gets involved, sponsored by the Exeter Area Kiwanis Club. We've already spoken about the speakers and such, and we've talked about all of our stuff that we're going to be doing there. And you can also check it out at exeterufofestival.org if you want more details, schedules, all that good stuff.
And we're doing our show live from there on Sunday the 4th of September.
As always.
Yep. So visit our show website, behindtheparanormal.com, where you can find over 1,100 hours of our regular shows and special broadcasts since 2008 from CBS Radio, Achieve Radio, and here on WON AM and FM, including shows that have been restored in the archives there, and you can check those out. We also have a show app. It's free, doesn't do a lot, but it works. And you can browse our books along with those of our guest co-hosts at our show website.
And our website also has a charity page with links to several good causes that we've adopted over the years, including Hope for Hilldale Cemetery in Haverhill, Massachusetts, USA Cares, Canadian Veterans Advocacy, Helping Haiti's Orphans, the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation of America, the Sisterhood of Ground Zero, and most recently the Western Kentucky Tornado Relief Fund.
We got to find the flood fund. Anyway, so what are we concocting for next week, Ben?
Well, we have in the frying pan, we're stirring it around, putting some olive oil in there. On August 21st, we'll visit with Bigfoot in the Bridgewater Triangle with researcher John Horrigan. And you can send your questions and comments to Paul at BehindTheParanormal.com.
No, John is not a Bigfoot himself. He just found a few. So we leave you today with a thought from our favorite 13th century poet and theologian Rumi. Quote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." Unquote.
No, we still have a few seconds.
Well, it depends how serious the wound, I guess.
Well, yeah, right.
Yeah, I get the point.
Well, hey, if the light is antibiotics, we'll work it out.
Yeah. Well, 13th century, what are you going to do?
That's true.
Herbal medicine.
And you are?
I am Paul Eno.
And I'm Ben Eno. And thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey, and we shall see you next time on Behind the Paranormal.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.